Hey. Good evening, everybody. It is now 6 o'clock. This is the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education board meeting for Monday, July 11th. Can I get a roll call?
Espino.
Present.
Lang absent. Mencia.
Here.
Petrielli here. Reed.
Here.
Zager.
Here.
And Schumacher.
Okay, remember to turn your mic on and speak loudly so the those in the crowd and the our viewers online can hear us. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Go ahead.
Good evening. Before we continue forward with our agenda for tonight's meeting, we would just like to observe a moment of silence and reflection for all those who were affected by the tragedy in Highland Park on the 4th of July. So I would ask for a brief moment of silence. As a school community, we want to offer our sincerest and deepest sympathies, condolences, and support to the many people whose lives were forever changed by the events that simply have no explanation. We ask that our CCSD59 community continue to uphold those in Highland Park and beyond who are now facing unthinkable challenges ahead that come along the road to healing. I think it's also a good time to reflect on the power of our schools and the roles that school districts play within our communities, and reaching out to our Highland Park school community in solidarity or in support for the tragedy that they experienced. Thank you.
Item 4.0, comments and suggestions from the public. Cindy, no one signed in, correct? Is there anyone here from the public like to speak? Okay. With that, we have 5.0 district presentations, 5.01 the Cropper demographic study. I'm assuming that's Tom and Terry.
It's a full team, as well as we are joined here with Matthew Cropper, who is with us via Zoom to take us through our presentation. Just to give a little bit of history before I turn it over to Mr. Cropper for the presentation. As we have been exploring for the last year, really around our strategic plan and our guiding principles around our equity work, one of the processes that we went through, along with some other audits, was really looking at our school utilization as well as enrollment. And so we elicited the help from Cropper to help look at our demographics, our enrollment trends across our entire school community. They are an organization that's worked with us for many years. And so they were a great partner with us in looking at what the future holds, how we can best utilize our resources. And they will continue to partner with us as we work to reach some resolutions and some opportunities for creating greater equity for all students in District 59. So with that, I will turn it over to Matthew Cropper.
Can you hear us, Matt?
I can. Thank you, Dr. Bresnahan and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to be here or remotely to present to you this evening. Tonight I am going to go over a review of school utilization. This is a little bit of background also, some of the work that we have done with the district. And I'm going to go to let's see. I see the screen in the back, Ben, but I don't see the sharing. I'm just going to go to my slideshow.
I'm just going to run it from here, so you can just kind of have your face up on the screen. Then you just let me know when to advance the slides. And
okay, perfect.
Both of those TVs. Both of those are that. Okay. All right. Give me
one. Okay, so you could just go to the slide 4. That's perfect. So We are Cropper GIS Consulting. We're a K-12 planning firm. We work remotely, but our office is based out of Ohio, and our staff lives all over the East Coast. And we've done work all over the United States with schools. Most of our focus is K-12 planning, and we do a lot of school realignment and demographic study work and facility utilization studies and things like that. So if you go to the next slide, you can see just some of the work that we've done recently in the region, and we've done work all over the United States. And so we bring perspectives to the table on what other districts have done, how have they handled other challenges that similar challenges that you guys may have had. And we bring that perspective to the table and some of the experience that we've done with these various districts. You can go to the next slide. I am Matthew Cropper. I've been working with this district for probably about 12, 13 years on different tasks and different studies and things like that. But I have over 20 years of experience in doing this. I'm the president of the company. And I also do work with the U.S. Department of Justice, the Office of Civil Rights, where I help with various desegregation cases and things like that. That's none of the work that we're doing here, but just bring a lot of experience and background from different perspectives and different angles and different agencies. If you go to the next slide, just a little bit of a brief history of my firm with the school district. And we've been working since 2011 with you. Like I mentioned, we did a demographic study about 10 years ago. And we also did an update in 2014. So we've been studying your district for quite a while. Tracking your enrollment, tracking how communities are yielding students and different dynamics that are going on with your district, and know it pretty well. We also did a rezoning study, i.e. redistricting in 2013, and studying some building utilization and trying to help resolve some challenges at that time. And most recently, we've been working with the district since 2020. We've done another demographic study update, and we've also studied your utilization and demographics, and really starting to frame things and put things together so that we can understand what the current challenges are of the district and the strengths, and how we can may be able to help the district, or how the district, what they may consider to help resolve some of the challenges that they have. And if you look at the next slide, you can see this is just a simple map of your elementary attendance areas in your district, and you could see that you have a lot of prominent geography that affects your district. I-90 is a significant one, where you have a lot of population north of the interstate and then also south of the interstate. If you look at the next slide, you could see how the areas that are non-residential are grayed out. So you have a lot of area geography in your district that's not residential, more industrial and things like that. And so if you look at it from a different lens like this, you could see that there is a lot of territory in your district that doesn't have population in it, which that can be a benefit. It also can be a challenge in trying to work through how to serve all the communities in your district. If you look at the next slide, you can see your junior high school zones. You have the three schools, and how each area that's colored on the map shows the different areas that attend or that are zoned to those schools. And you have the big park over on the northwest side that we keep on the map just to show that feature as well. And then if you look at the following slide, it's the same overlay with the non-residential areas, just so you can see kind of how the schools are serving different communities. And you can also see how there are pockets of the community that are right around schools, and there are also parts of the community that are not connected to the residential area, but it's all area, communities that all the schools are serving throughout the entire district. So if you go to the next slide, just a little bit of a background of some of our most recent work. Like I said, we just recently completed a 10-year demographic study looking at your enrollment by school, by grade out the next 10 years to see how that's tracking. We've also done a utilization forecast so that we can look and see how your enrollment looks as it relates to capacity. And with our demographic study, we did a lot of mapping to kind of see where the hot spots are in your district in terms of which neighborhoods are feeding schools at different rates and things like that. We've also done some analysis of your district, just the overall demographics of the district as a whole, and then also how the demographics look at each school and how those compare to the district as a whole. Because usually when you're assessing demographics of each school, you kind of want to compare it to what the demographics are of the district to see kind of what is a primer or a benchmark to try to have. And so as we've done a lot of that analysis and put some things together, we start to look at modeling the different scenarios that may help address imbalances. You have some imbalances in utilization and also some demographics. And so we're starting to work with your team of administrators to kind of evaluate that and look at those things. If you go to the next slide, just a little overview on our demographic study findings. We found that your enrollment is going to continue to decline over the course of the next 10 years throughout the length of the study. It's not a rapid decline. We see some year-to-year fluctuation at the elementary level, probably about 150 student drop at the elementary level, and then a little bit more at the junior high level. But they do vary from school to school. Schools that have a higher proportions of multifamily housing are showing more signs of stability, and schools that have a higher proportion of single family owner-occupied housing are seeing some greater declines as those communities are starting to age and empty nest, and so fewer students are coming out of those neighborhoods. But not all areas of the district are impacted equally. Most of your elementary schools are forecasted to show some decline, but there are a few that are forecasted to remain stable and or grow. And all three junior high schools are forecasted to decline through the life of this forecast. If you look at the next slide, this kind of puts it into perspective as it relates to utilization. So these are your elementary schools. And you can see there's a color key that shows basically a range based off of how utilized the building is. So the darkest green is what we would consider under 65%, which we would consider underutilized. And then over 105% is a deep red, which is overutilized. And then there are ranges in between. What's most ideal for a district is somewhere in that lighter green, sort of the lightest green before you get to the pink, would be kind of the sweet spot for utilization. And you could see this shows each elementary school's enrollment and their capacity and their utilization as it relates to the enrollment forecast over the next 10 years. So you see a lot of green here, and so there is a lot of available capacity in your district. I would probably say that you have too much elementary capacity in your district, because you could see it shows around 64% right now in terms of utilization of all elementary schools. If you look at all students and all seats, and it's going down to about 62% at the end of this forecast. But not all schools are the same. But Brentwood is hovering there in the mid to high 80s. And so that shows some signs of imbalance, and where other ones are underutilized. This one is getting closer into the orange, or into the pink and red. And then also we're seeing some growth in Bird over the next 10 years of the forecast, and more stability. And then you have a grouping of schools in north of 90 and south of 90 that are underutilized and are forecasted to still remain underutilized. If you look at the next slide, this is your junior highs in the same format, and you have an imbalance in utilization of your junior highs. Grove is running in the 90s, almost, it's at about 95%, so it's just one point above being in the darker red. But that is forecasted to go down, the enrollment, so it will get some relief through demographics, but it stays in the pink throughout the life of the forecast. And your other two junior highs have some available space. Your overall junior high utilization is around between 80% right now, and you have Grove at 95, Holmes at 65, and Friendship at 76. So there's a broad spread of utilization, and it's most ideal to have, if in a perfect world, all of your junior highs would be at around 80% utilized. If you go to the next slide, we've also just been looking at the demographics of the schools to see how they compare to the overall average of the entire district. I've already talked about utilization, but just some things with elementary utilization, some statistics. 3 schools deviate more than 15% from the average utilization of the district's total elementary capacity. So Brentwood's running high, that's over 15% high from the district average. And then Juliet Low and Claremont are running. Low is running on the low side at 41%, and Claremont's running high at 82%. So it's kind of, you have different varying capacities. One school is at 41%, and one is at 87%. So it's a pretty big spread there in utilization of your schools. So you want to try, in a perfect world, ensure that schools are as equitable as possible as it relates to utilization. Looking at some demographic data, 9 schools deviate from the average Hispanic enrollment by more than 10%. So you have some that are very on the low side of Hispanic, if you look at the overall district percentage, and then some are on the high side. And so you have about 9 of those. And if you look within 10%, if you look at a 15% band, 5 schools are outside of that threshold of plus or minus 15% of the district average. And then 4 of those deviate by more than 15% of the white enrollment. And so you have some different spreads and imbalances in your race and ethnic demographics of the schools as well. And looking at some of the free and reduced lunch data, because socioeconomics is a huge part of it all, and a good thing to gauge and study. Currently, 5 schools deviate from the average by more than 10%, and 2 of those deviate by more than 15%. So these are some of the things that kind of frame out some of the challenges that exist in the district, and I feel that there are some things that could be considered to help address this if the district continues to look at ways to make things as equitable as possible. And then we have your junior high, just in the same frame. You're both basically a utilization imbalance that I mentioned already. I think I've covered that pretty well. Friendship's Hispanic enrollment is more than 10% lower than the average, and Holmes is within 10% of the average white, but 10% lower than other 2 schools. I think the demographics of your junior highs in terms of race and ethnic, there isn't much of a substantial difference between the schools. I think it's really more the focus of your junior highs is really more around utilization and making sure that utilization is balanced. Pretty balanced regarding free and reduced lunch as well. So if you go to the next slide, we have been looking at different relief strategies. We always try to figure all the different ways that you can help address, provide relief and provide more balance of these different factors that we've talked about. One of the things is looking at programs. How are programs being offered at schools? And is moving a program going to help balance the utilization or demographics? And so looking at that is something that's it's a relatively easy thing to do, as opposed to looking at capital construction or repurposing a building or redistricting. Those kind of things are much more challenging to do. So program adjustments is something that we're studying and looking at. Another option that that we're evaluating is redistricting by moving boundary lines to try to help relieve and adhere closer to trying to get schools in closer and balance with each other. Another concept that we're studying is school pairing. And this is basically looking at taking 2 zones for 2 schools and creating 1 zone for 2 schools. And you can have a K2, 1 school would serve all the K through 2nd graders in the area, and then another school would serve all the 3rd through 5th graders in the area. So that allows you to expand the size of the zone and the population. And there are pros and cons to doing pairing. It is a very successful model in many other districts, and it's something that we are evaluating in terms of looking at the configuration of schools to try to help bring things into closer, more equitable. And then another thing that we're looking at is talking about the utilization of buildings and things like that. So possibly looking at alternate uses of buildings and repurposing maybe a building, using a building for a different use, and those types of things. So really, you could see that where all options are on the table, just really just studying things and making sure that we don't leave any stone unturned, and evaluating these independently and thoroughly, just to see what kind of things the district could consider. Some options are going to create slight improvements in different factors that I've talked about, and other options will give you a greater improvement in the different factors that the challenges that I have talked about tonight. So with that said, that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys had.
Sure. Hey, Matt, this is Robert Mancia. Thank you for your time. If we could just kind of go at a high level, I saw in the report how you develop the data. Maybe we can explain it too, just for the members of the board and the folks at home, of what do you look at in order to get these numbers? I know you mentioned census data and Cook County Department of Health records, et cetera, but if you can just kind of give us a high level overview of how you calculate the data to make these projections.
Yes, sir. To do the enrollment forecast, we start actually with a population study. So we look at the total population of the school district and the total population within each attendance area, and we do a population forecast of all age bands within each attendance area, and that population forecast drives an enrollment forecast. And so we look at all kinds of factors. Age structure of the population, different things of migration, and how many people are moving in, how many people are going out, and overall changes in enrollment over the last 10 years. And so we also look at housing and look and examine how many homes are being built and sort of general housing activity in the district to see what rates it's going. And so the population forecast is first, and then the enrollment forecast is driven really by the population study. We did use 2010 census data pretty heavily. We have some 2020 census data, total population. We also can calculate population under 18 for the 2020 census, and we also have race and ethnic data from the 2020 census. There is still a lag in 2020 census data. They have not fully released all the data that they normally do every decade. We're expecting the full release to happen next year, mid next year. And so they keep sort of kicking the can down the road, but we do have some good data to work with the total population as a gauge. And those factors are really what we look at in developing an enrollment forecast.
No, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, Matt. This is Joe Sager. You probably can't see me. For the forecast, there's a comment in the document that the smaller the area, the harder it is to forecast. So, how confident can we be on school-to-school forecasts?
Well, we've done it several times, 2 or 3 times already before this last round, and we've been tracking pretty well. But yes, the smaller the area, the greater the error. We usually like to strive for plus or minus 2% at the life of the forecast at the district level. And when you get down to school level, sometimes it can vary between sometimes 5, sometimes 10%. It really, sometimes we're right on the money, and it really depends on different things that happen at that small level or district level that can influence changes in what we have forecasted based off of the demographic trends.
And then we have a lot of schools where our boundaries are not continuous. They are sort of spread out in strange ways for historical reasons. When I look at the forecast for a particular school, if it's not contiguous, how do I tell what section the population changes are happening in?
So the forecast is done at the attendance area level. So it won't give you nuances of changes from within a smaller area of an attendance area. The forecast is only the lowest level that's forecasted is the attendance area level. Although we have been studying and monitoring individual dynamics of communities and neighborhoods and have a good understanding of some of the trends at that micro level. Although we don't have it forecasted out by grade for the next 10 years.
Yeah, you had mentioned somewhere in there that you could see the difference between single family housing and multifamily housing. For mobile homes, which category do they fall into?
Mobile homes would be more of a multifamily housing type. That usually falls into sometimes they're categorized independently as and different from apartments and things like that. But we have been looking at mobile homes in this district independently, and because you do have a couple of communities within the district that are predominantly mobile home type, and they significantly contribute to your school's enrollment. And so it's something that we've been tracking for the last 10 years, in addition to the other communities in your district.
Should I keep going? I got like two or three more. So for things like grade centers or consolidating a school, when you have grade centers and you draw from a larger area, doesn't that necessitate more transportation?
Transportation can be a challenge with grade centering. There's also different methods that districts can look at in terms of different models for transportation. But transportation and more on the basis of the impact of the parent. If a parent has two children, say a kindergartner and a fourth grader, they could have two children in two different buildings, and that's challenges with events that go on, things like that, and getting to both places. So it can be a challenge with transportation, yes, and it may not be as efficient as a single sort of a smaller concentric circle around a school, but if you have zones that are disconnected and that are communities that are far away from the school, those communities are already going a good distance to schools as it is.
And then maybe this is a crazy idea, but have we looked at maybe relocating a school? Because our population is very spread out and not necessarily where the schools are. I know that's probably a future question.
Matt, I'll chime in on that as well. I think that when we talk about what we currently have we have more than we need. So given that factor, if the board wanted to look at, are you suggesting like building a new school in a new area?
Possibly.
Okay, so in that, there would be the other considerations that we would want to look at, in particular around the balance of our demographics. We wouldn't want to create another isolating situation by adding a school in a geographic region.
Right, and I'm just thinking in terms of transportation.
Yes.
But that was another question I had for the heat maps. When I look at them, you can't really compare from one school to the other, right? It's each school's individually.
That's correct. The heat maps are just reflect the population of that particular school. That's correct.
I got a question. Ben, are we able to go to the slide that has the greens and the pinks with each school? Yes. Let's look at this. I guess I want to understand this. So some of the schools, for example, Forest View, darker green, they're in the 50s. So we're saying that basically the utilization's at 56%. In other words, half the schools being used effectively. Is that's what we're saying with these numbers, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And I guess just to understand a little further, for Brentwood, for example, that's in the pinks and the upper 80s. Let me see how to phrase this. Are the schools built to operate effectively at 100% capacity? Like, for example, this restaurant holds 250 people. 250 people could sit and eat comfortably in the restaurant? Or is this like a car? When you go too fast, you're in the red when you're in the 87%. And I don't know, maybe if this is a question for Matt or maybe for Dr. Bresnahan.
I think for both, one of the things that Cropper has given us input on when he said that sweet spot, I believe you said 80%.
Yes, around that. Yes.
And I think the lived experience that we have, like Brentwood's a great example of a building that's at 87%. And when we are in Brentwood, you feel it. So for example, this year there is no teacher's lounge. Next year, we are adding 2 portable classrooms. So the feel of it, when again, this plays out a lot into class size and programming that all impact utilization as well. So you're talking at Brentwood, larger class sizes, whereas another district or another school within the district may have fewer students and use all of their classrooms, but at a lower capacity per classroom.
Mhm.
So even that's like another layer into these numbers.
And so when you look at things like pairing, right? Are you looking at a school that's underutilized, pairing it with a school that's overutilized and kind of balancing them out, or?
I think
Well,
that's one of the opportunities, yes, as well as the other solutions like redistricting and demographic balancing, right, Matt?
Yeah, it could be a combination of both, moving boundaries and pairing buildings together. It's most ideal if you can pair buildings that have differing utilizations, but actually it's more ideal when you're in pairing scenarios to look at buildings that are comparable in size. Because if you're trying to split up into two groups of 3 grade levels, you can run into challenges when you have a building that has 300 more seat capacity as part of the pairing, because those grade cohort sizes are relatively comparable in size. So there's different things that you have to consider when you're looking at it. But in pairing and combining zones, you have opportunities to also look at moving lines to balance utilization as well.
And I think that's a significant piece, because while we're talking about percent utilization, it's also really important to compare our capacities. And even when we look at our junior highs, so at the elementary level, 422 at our low capacity, someone spot check me, I believe, is on our low end, up to Salt Creek, which has a capacity of 673, which is actually almost comparable to one of our junior highs. And then if we look at our junior high schools, I think on the next slide, Ben, we range from Holmes at 692 up to Grove, which is 930. So the sheer size of the schools are very discrepant.
Mm-hmm. Is there any way to know? I'm trying to think of what can the district control in terms of population. And obviously, birth rates, things like that, out of district's control. But what about the number of private schools in the district? Has that number, I don't know if we even know, has it remained constant of, let's say, simple math, 1,000 kids live in the district, but 10% go to private schools. Has that number remained constant through the years, or is it increasing where we're going to constantly see public school numbers going down?
Well, we normally have seen the public-private rates are relatively stable, but with COVID, the last 2020 and 2021, we did see some changes in those rates and participation rates, and some higher participation rates at other offerings other than public schools in some places. homeschool options and those types of things. We've seen increases in. I know that this district experienced a drop in enrollment from COVID, as in most districts. Usually it's been about 3 to 6%, concentrated more in the earlier grades, K through third. But usually your public to private participation has been fairly stable. And I would imagine that you're going to get some students still trickling back from the impact of COVID and things, but it's going to remain relatively stable, your public to private participation rates.
Do we know was the same survey conducted in 2012? And if so, are we able to kind of see, not the accuracy, but how, whether, or I guess maybe how close were those projections to what is taking place in 2022?
Yes, we did do forecasts in 2012 back in that time frame. And so we can take a look at that. We have tracked accuracy over the years and things like that. And so we could certainly, you have the ability to do that with the prior studies and comparing to current enrollment.
Do you have any idea how many private schools there are in our district? I know that Queen of the Rosary is in Elk Grove Village, but what other private schools are there?
I don't know off the top of my head. I could talk with my demographers and follow up with you on how many private schools we have identified in your district.
Matt, we
The
have
key-
that information.
We actually surveyed a number of years ago. I think Cindy, you even helped me, contacted a number of the local private schools in the area to get an idea of enrollment. Some track what district those kids come from, some do not. From a perspective of in district, St. Zachary's, which is in Des Plaines, right next to Des Plaines, to Friendship Junior High. And then QR right here in Elk Grove, which is next to Grove Junior High. There are a number of others in the area, Wayside, which is in Arlington Heights, St. James is in Arlington Heights, St. Raymond's, which is in Mount Prospect. Those fall outside of our district, but we do know, I mean, as long as transportation is provided by the family, anyone can attend those schools.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any charter?
Not that I'm aware of.
So let me ask this, and it may sound silly, but what if the Bears come to town? There's the discussion of the Chicago Bears moving nearby. It's not in our district, but it is fairly close. If all of a sudden it's announced 2 years from now that the Chicago Bears are moving to Arlington Heights, I don't know if that's going to have an impact in more people coming to town or more people moving out of town.
Yeah, absolutely. Something like that is not something that we have. What we assume is that the same business climate and the same labor force balance that is in the district will remain at the same levels. If, say, the Bears move to town, or Microsoft opens or Amazon opens up, a 5,000 employee something or other in the district, that can impact your district's enrollment in terms of it basically impact the flow in migration of population, in and out migration of population. And so there's a lot of things that are going on that can affect this enrollment forecast or any enrollment forecast. And we identify assumptions, the things that are non-demographic that we can't control. But there are things that are really in play right now that can have an impact on your forecast, like for home mortgage rates and those types of things. I mean, if those continue to go up, then it's going to slow migration, and actually you'll see less in and out migration and buying and selling of homes, and that kind of stalls that enrollment growth and that turn and churn of younger families moving in. And so if mortgage rates continue to go up, then our enrollment forecast is probably going to be too high. If mortgage rates jump back down to 0.5% or 2%, 3%, then our enrollment forecast may be too low. And those types of factors, I think, are things that are probably going to have more of a bearing and an impact on the forecast than something bigger, although something big like the bears would definitely impact you.
Mhm.
So I think that was kind of my question, because I said in your report there were a bunch of assumptions, and one of them was the mortgage rates, which, you made these assumptions and things have changed dramatically within the last 6 months when you started this analysis for us. And one of them was the mortgage rates, cost of gas, and some of the other ones. So
Yeah.
besides like mortgage rates, or a large employer moving into the area or a large employer moving out of the area, which have an adverse effect, most likely have an adverse effect on our enrollment, what are some of the other assumptions that could be impacted by the changes which has been happening in the last 6 to 9 months within the economy?
Really, it's the things that affect the home sales activity is the crux of things that can affect you and drive change. That the gasoline inflation is definitely something that slows migration, and in terms of people choosing to move to your district. If they have to commute all the way into the city, they may choose other options. Those types of examples like that. It's really anything else that other things that can affect your district's enrollment is if something happens to all of this, say a lot of this non-residential area, if some of it were to be rezoned into residential, something like that, changes in zoning of your district, that kind of thing can affect population. So it's really more about the housing market are the things that have the more immediate impact. They say that Dr. McKibben, our demographer, says that the demographics are like a super tanker, more so than a speedboat. When something happens in the U.S. or with our economy, we experience the change, but then it takes a long time for the trends to start changing, the demographics to start changing. Where as opposed to something happens and it turns right at like a speedboat, and demographics don't do that. Something happens in the world like COVID, and then it takes you about 4 or 5 years before you really start seeing some of the longer term effects of it. Although with COVID, it was not a very good example because that was an immediate jolt that caused a big impact to the enrollment in districts. But it takes a while for these demographic factors, for something to happen to cause for you to start seeing change in your enrollment. And the interest rates are one where, as that keeps ticking up, we'll start seeing fewer home sales. But we're also expecting to see the new home construction market slow down, and a lot of homes right now are on the verge of turning over. A lot of people in the last 2 years were not selling their homes because of COVID, and also COVID, the result of that caused home prices to skyrocket, or sales prices, and we expect that to level off. And so a lot of people who were wanting to sell the last 2 years are going to start putting their homes back on the market, and we do expect to see a lot more existing homes sales to occur. And we think it's going to drive down home prices overall. And your district is one that has a lot of existing home sales, available potentially for sale, and so that can cause changes too down the road for your district.
I do have another question. This is more related to home ownership, which we talk about how interest rates and mortgage rates affects that as compared to apartments. And we have some schools that are heavily relying on apartment complexes that are, provide students to those schools. How does that affect the migration based on the mortgage rates and stuff? As of, mortgage rates get higher because more expensive for families to afford a house. So more look towards apartments and
multifamily settings are more stable than single family type housing, because single family type housing has a cycle of home ownership where the owner stays in the house after their children age out, and so there's a sort of period of empty nesting and no children in the house until it turns over. Multifamily is different in that multifamily is usually occupied, fully occupied, and the yields remain pretty stable. As one family with children moves out, another family with children usually move into those settings. So we don't see big fluctuations in multifamily yields. Although over the last 15 years, I have seen multifamily yields go up, and I think that just maybe due to some changes in the economy. But I would think that your multifamily type settings are going to remain more stable and yielding similar amounts of students through the course of the forecast.
Oh, go ahead.
I cannot speak to the other communities because I don't live there. I only live in Elk Grove Village, but I can tell you that many parts of Elk Grove Village were built up in the early 60s and 70s, and those people who are still living there, many of them are all senior citizens. And as they begin to die or move out, you will get more families, I'm sure, because, I mean, there's just no children in the area where I live at all.
Let me ask on that point too, Mardell. When we talk about like single family homes, has the number of estimated children, has that gone down? You always hear studies of kids getting married later in life, having less kids. Are we estimating that each single family home has 3 kids, like for example, or over time has that number gone down?
It really varies from place to place and from community to community. And, normally a single family house is yielding right now. We've done pupil yield studies, a lot of them over the last decade. And it's right around 0.4, 0.5 students per housing unit is what you see. But if in areas that are, that have an older housing age structure, which you do have some areas in your district that have a higher median age, and you'll see that in our forecast, our demographic study, the median age of some of these areas. In those areas, you'll have smaller students per household, but those areas, as you were indicating, are really on the verge of turning over and younger families moving in, and so those yields will start to go up as those neighborhoods that have a lot of population who are looking to downsize are going to be replaced with younger families. And you see a lot of that over on the southwestern corner of the district in the Admiral Byrd area, and down in there we see that happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me ask this too, with your expertise, because you showed us examples of other districts nearby here in Illinois where you've looked at. Our district, I say, is unique because a big chunk of it, like we saw in the map, is industrial. A big chunk of it is forest preserve. But a lot of, like in the report, you talk about, younger ages, 18 to 34, I think, they move out, they go to college, they move away, the early nesters, etc. What is anything unique or any outliers that you see with our district specifically that you don't see elsewhere, or that caught your eye as being kind of unique for here?
Well, every district is unique, and you definitely have a lot of unique dynamics to your district in terms of how your population is, the residential areas in the district, and where the residential areas are concentrated. You have a dominant factor in the mobile home communities that are just near the Oasis and like off Toohey Road and that area, and those contribute a lot of students. There's a lot of kids coming out of those small, very high density population there that's enrolled at your buildings that they're zoned to. You do have, but you have other multifamily settings like that scattered about, which is common in many other districts. I think that the fact that you have big separations of industrial and residential is definitely adds to a unique dynamic for your district, and just how the population is differs when you look north of 90 versus south of 90. and the different, the density of communities and the residential and industrial composition of the different areas makes you unique. But there are a lot of things that you are likenesses, and as it relates to other districts that we've worked with, and being in a sort of an inner ring suburb to a large metro area, and so we see a lot of commonalities in other places that we've worked.
I have another question. Anybody? When does the data go stale? And what I mean by that is, we can conduct a study. Let's say we make changes based on the results of the study, and all of a sudden, all of our buildings are operating in the green. They're all in where they should be. On average, when does the next change have to happen? When does is it a 10-year cycle? Is it 20 years? Because I'm sure, the district, the last time they made major district changes, to the boundaries, things probably looked really great for a couple of years, and then now we're here, and now we're making changes again. So it's just kind of trying to get an idea of what the life cycle is for these types of changes.
Yeah, and it varies from place to place depending on what kind of change a district's going through. But when we did some rezoning back in around 2013, and the schools are relatively, a lot of them are relatively comparable in utilization. You do have some outliers. I would say when you're looking at the enrollment forecast, we always track that 2% threshold. If we start seeing things going plus or minus 2% at the district level, then we start to evaluate what's changing in the district that we haven't anticipated. So that's really, I think that would be a key thing to keep an eye on. And of course, if something big happens, like what we saw with COVID, that's really can be a game changer from from how demographics work. And so something big and substantial happens, that can be maybe warrant a relook at it. But usually if you're working with this and you're working with the forecast, they should be good for the next, I would say, 5 years. You could really, it's a good outlook. The next 5 years you never know what's going to happen in the next 10 years. But if things are sort of going along like they are now with the climate and of the economy, and it's sort of things don't fluctuate greatly, the forecast should hold up for the next 10 years. But that's saying a lot, because things are changing a lot. With it, every 3 to 5 years, it seems like we're throwing some big curveball in the U.S. that makes us have to make adjustments.
Robert, I think to your question as well, and we'll share a little bit more of the historical data that'll speak to that point. I think some of it is looking, when Matt talked about the 4 different options for us, one of them, and the easiest of them, being programmatic moves. I think those sustain the shortest amount of viability in the long run, because the needs of the students change the quickest. So when we're looking at a solution that's going to be the longest term fix, I think it's looking across multiple options to create a long-term system of better predictability.
Right. I think that's all I had. Anybody?
So just to give next steps so that we can kind of bring this piece to a closure and let Matt get back to his vacation. But this is the first of the presentations that Mr. Cropper will be here with us for. On August 1st, we will be having a more concentrated meeting around our budget hearing, and then we will dedicate the remainder of that meeting specifically to looking at the options that Cropper is building in conjunction with the administration. My hope is to also start to bring in other stakeholder voices so that we can get more input. We're also going to be planning, and Ben will speak to this in a little bit as well, how can we get some more input from a broader community perspective as we look at building an awareness around this data, creating a sense and an understanding of where are our inequities that exist, where are some additional inequities that perhaps we haven't even seen or are, have knowledge of, and then begin to look at our opportunities for addressing those in a more comprehensive long-term plan. So that will be coming, the more in-depth discussion on August 1st. I want our community to be really looking out for a, I don't want to call it a survey, but it will be in a survey format where we can share information as well as solicit some information from our community members, and then more fully engage in that discussion at our August 1st meeting, and then continue that momentum as we build a plan and some solutions.
I just have two asks. One, we have can we share the whole crop report with we send out the agenda or the meeting minutes to the community?
Yes, the full report is going to be made available publicly,
Okay.
as well as the presentation.
And then I know we have the detail from the previous cropper thing. I think kind of goes back to Robert's question of, where did how the projections, correlate. I think just kind of seeing that from a from a historical perspective, maybe share that in the Friday update with us.
Okay, so we will work with Matt on that to get that additional data and then present that either, depending on when we get that, either at August 1st or ahead of the August 1st meeting. So if there's no other additional questions for Matt, I'm going to have us switch gears and go through our historical piece that Mr. Ludloff will take us through, just to give a little bit more context. And I know this was a question that was brought up from the board as well. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Have a good vacation.
Yeah, as we transition, I failed to recognize I probably need to do some more research. There are many more private schools in the area, and actually Brentwood Baptist Christian Academy is in one of our former buildings, and I failed to even mention that. So there looks like there's the Science Academy of Chicago is also in our boundaries, which is over by Oakton in the kind of Devonshire Friendship area, and then a number of other private schools in the area. But that's something we can grab and highlight that. Okay, so moving on to the historical piece. As we talked last time, a number of questions came up, and we just thought we'd throw some slides together to review those pieces. This first piece really is something to just highlight because we had a policy change just back in March, where prior to that, policy 7.30, student assignment and intra-district transfer on my left, that's the former language, which really said every year the superintendent should review attendance areas. And if, establish procedures to review that and give parents a chance to look at if they wanted to request different things. This is new on my right, and I highlighted the piece in orange. The new policy, Rich really has, we don't create these policies. These are based on actions that take at the state and national level. We work with a policy group that really helps us formulate these, but really talked about creating new units using a lens that considers preventing segregation and the elimination of separating students in the district schools because of color, race, and nationality. So that is very new language adopted just this past March, but creates a different lens and process for the superintendent to guide this process through and for us to go through that. So we wanted to highlight that piece.
Tom, before you move on, one of these things that on the state is now evaluating, when it's on the state report card, we will be evaluating our demographics and our equity stuff. The reason why that was put in there is it's become a new state reporting requirement.
Yes, and this fall, and actually it's based on old data, 2018-19 data, but as part of the school report card, the equity continuum journey will be published for every school district in the state. Not only does it have connections to demographics, but to results, to staff that are hired in the district. You get a score for each of those categories. And I'm sure as before that's released, we'll have a chance to share a little more and outline that with the board, but every district in the state will get a report based on that. And it's not an accountability system. It's to provide information to all school districts to take and review and possibly take actions.
And I'll just add before, if we could go stay on there real quick, because when we think about the why are we doing this? Why are we doing this now? I want to just reiterate back to this. We are not only doing it because it is we are seeing these discrepancies amongst our students and our student outcomes and how we're able to support our students in their learning. But we're also required to do so as per this policy. And this is to be done on an annual basis. So this isn't, a new superintendent coming in. This isn't new board members coming in, and now we're really going to prioritize this. It's all of those factors coming in and telling us how do we really analyze what is happening in our district, and what are we going to be required to do on an ongoing basis to ensure that we are building a sustainable model for our students to experience equitably across all schools, regardless of where they live.
Equitably. Yeah, you said it. It's important. I agree. On the other hand, you can't have everybody equal on everything because it just doesn't work out that way. It's not possible. You do
That's
the
a
best
great
you-
point, Mardell. Equality and equity are not the same thing, and
Exactly,
understanding the
exactly.
difference is really, because each child is different and may
Mhm,
need different things.
That's right.
And each of our areas and our schools are different and may
And
need different
everybody needs
things.
something a little different.
So this next slide is really, this was some of the questions that came
Mhm.
up last time, that the history of District 59, at least from a building perspective. So at one point, District 59 did have 21 schools, close to 12,000 enrollment. And really, as all these homes in this area were built, most were filled with young families, and the district went through a tremendous growth period. And then, to speak to some of the things Matt talks about, people stay and things settle out, and it becomes an empty nester situation, or however you want to look at it. But ultimately, over time, a number of schools were closed. The last school actually closed was Lively Junior High, which was formerly on this property. District 59 used to have 5 middle school, junior high schools. We now have 3. We had, I think it's 18 elementary schools. I might be off on that, but you could see basically the year the schools were opened, then if closed, and then what happened to some of those. As I, realizing Brentwood Baptist is, of course, there it is. It used to be High Ridge Knowles School in Des Plaines. So was closed and sold to that group, and they house a school there today.
Marshall School.
A number of the schools were bought by park districts, or they tore down the schools and created parks, or the Elk Grove Township had a school just across the street for a while that they held the daycare in. It has now been demolished, but that's basically the history around the schools in the area. Of course, they were placed based on enrollment, the number of houses in those areas, and how many kids lived there at that time. And then as more kids came, in some cases, they built a new school and then didn't need that school shortly after that. Any questions? Yeah.
No, just a comment more. It's really fascinating because you see the boom in the 60s. And in the 1960s, this district looked at population studies from 57 to 67 and decided we needed to build all of these schools. And I think a lot of times it's important to remember that the schools, it's fluid, things fluctuate, things change. We can operate within the boundaries of the district, but look at how much change there is since the 60s to now, and how much that population has changed since then. But it's really fascinating to kind of see it all listed out.
Yes, I think in doing some of the research, and just to recognize Cindy Pullen, this is her work. I'm just sharing it, but to see some of the minutes of major discussions around the one piece I will say, obviously, with technology, the sophistication of the enrollment projection process is much more sophisticated today than it was in the 50s and 60s. But yes, I think the district saw some case where they literally built a school and closed it less than 10 years later, as population settled out. So yes, it's a great point that things change over time, sometimes really quickly, sometimes not.
But I don't
Well,
see
in the
the
80s
oh, go ahead, Myrtle.
In the 80s, Grove was bursting at its seams, absolutely bursting at its seams, because we hadn't even put any additions onto it yet. So, I mean, there were so many people
Sure.
that there were double people in every locker, and it was.
Well, I think it's a great example, but we had a relationship with Queen of the Rosary where kids came to Grove for, I believe, science, maybe lunch. So for half a day, all these 6th, 7th, and 8th graders crossed the street, and
Yeah,
it was a
from
dual
Queen of the
enrollment
Rosary,
situation.
They came across for PE and science.
Okay, P and science.
Because they couldn't get it in their own schools. So but that worked out well. It was a good program. There really weren't that many problems for that. Space was the whole thing.
Yeah, I appreciated the question earlier, just my comment. Schools, are they built for that capacity piece? Well, when these schools were built, basically it was one program. Now we know whether it's special ed or language, there's so many more programs that I think really changes the capacity versus when I was principal of Claremont, we had an ESL program, but that was like 1 or 2 classes. Otherwise, everyone else was in a standard classroom. We could move kids around. There were 550 kids, and we could balance them out across those 4 and 5 sections. Whereas today, that looks different. Randy, I think you had a question.
I think going on to back in the 50s and 60s, this area was still developing. Where now this area is now fully developed. There's really not much
Very
space
mature.
out there for
You're right.
for improved changing housing. Unless one thing you brought up is maybe a residential area becomes an industrial area. Industrial area becomes a residential area. That would be the only kind of change I would see coming forward. So I think back then also World War II ended, and the baby boomers were all coming up. I think there was a lot crazier of a time with families and stuff like that. And I think now we are more at I'll say a mature level of growth.
Yeah.
But it'll still be interesting to see what happens in the next 10 years.
Yes.
Another thing that I'd just like to bring up, and I was going to give you a copy of it, I have it among my things here, is that we had a committee of 7s. Do you remember the committee of 7?
I do.
And it really was quite interesting. There were 7 board members, 7 administrators, 7 teachers. And if you wanted to open it up to the community, you could have 7 people from the community. It was an excellent idea. And we didn't actually make any policy, but we discussed everything and all the different ideas that could be used. And it was good discussion and good coming together. Agree, Tom?
I agree.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to serve on that committee for a few years. I think it was a springboard to me moving into administration. So I have to be positive on that. This next piece, we've shared this a few times. I adjusted a little bit, just trying to highlight using some color of, history of boundary programming and construction. Now, obviously, there's been other construction. I just tried to highlight things that were really connected to most often additions added to buildings due to enrollment. So you can see over this 30-year period, we've had 5 boundary changes. And really, I would call it 4.5 because the last 2 in 06, 07, and 13, 14 was reversing a prior decision. 6 construction pieces where we've added to schools at Grove, Friendship, Juliet Low, Ridge, Rupley, Frost, and then the ELC was built as part of that process. But as you can see, a majority of the decisions over that lengthy period of time have been connected to programming, whether that's early childhood programming, special ed programming, dual language programming, but lots of programming decisions of moving kids around, most often because we ran out of space somewhere. So we moved kids to where we had space.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, because if we look at this, probably the last significant change, 93, 94? Probably if the last 2, the boundary change.
Big boundary and a
Right.
significant boundary change, yes.
and that's a long time ago now. 93, 94 doesn't seem that long ago, but that is a long time
Almost
ago.
30 years.
It's how much has that area changed from then to now? And it's still under the same boundary.
Yeah, that's a great
But
point.
a lot of things were discussed in boundary committees that were essential to what we were doing.
Oh, sure.
And they were very controversial. We had all kinds of people coming and complaining. But the ultimate decisions made by the boundary committee were always right. They were right on target and they solved the problems. So that is another possibility. They weren't as friendly a situation as the committee of 7s because that was more balanced.
And then I just wanted to include, this is a 15-year view of enrollment across the district. And I updated it with the end of school year, June 2022 data. So you can see how that plays out over the last 5, 10, 15 years. I did do a quick review of where we were 30 years ago. And actually the numbers we were at, the difference between where we ended this school year and where we were 30 years ago is 9 kids. 9 kids. So I think the purpose of that is to say we've had fluctuations over time. You can see how they play out. Enrollment grows, it shrinks. I think obviously I would assume those projections will be pretty accurate. It will be interesting to preview or look back at what they said in 2012, 13 and how that compares to where we're at.
So you're saying whatever we build, Tom's got to be flexible to come back to same numbers at 30 years from now?
I recently, this was disconnected to this, but heard, I don't know if it was a podcast, I read a book where they talked about making decisions and talked about, make decisions that have the greatest impact for the most people for the longest period of time. For me, when I see all that programming changes, obviously we made lots of changes. I don't know if we can get to a point of most kids, positive, longest period of time. I think that would be great, but it'll be difficult.
And maybe this is a question too for Mr. Cropper of when I had asked him, like, when does the data go stale? And I think he said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're looking at your enrollment numbers plus minus 2%. And I think, is that what we're looking at? The bottom row, that's going to be each, and I don't know, maybe I interpreted it wrong, but we can.
Yeah, I think I have access to that. That document. We can take the district piece and see what did that look like over that period of time. I recall them saying at the district level, they feel pretty comfortable. The longer it goes and the smaller, I think he said up 5-10% swings, but we can definitely review. We can work with Mr. Cropper on that. I think we could probably do it ourselves. So that was a quick review of some of the history based on some of the questions that came up last time.
Good.
Any other questions? All right, I think I'll just stay. We're going to review our spring benchmark report. This is really tied to our iReady and Branching Minds data systems. Just a reminder to the group, those aren't curriculums. Those are assessment systems or data holding systems. Allows us to really consolidate our information and then really big picture wise compare internally and sometimes externally, both in Illinois and beyond. I will say, as we dig into the data, want to recognize our staff, our classroom teachers, our administrators. I think from my perspective, we had a positive, strong year in a year that wasn't normal, even though we had hoped it would be, and had some great progress over the course of the year. And I know people worked really hard. So as we look at this falls under goal 1, student growth and achievement, and it's the aligned assessment system. And really that performance target connected to strategic plan goal 1 is we want kids, 80% or more of our kids across all demographic groups will adequately be supported by tier 1 instruction as evidenced by that Branching Minds report. And when we talk about tier 1, that's kids at the 25th percentile or greater. I like that term, critical mass. So that really the purpose or the thought behind that is if you're in tier 1 in the classroom, we can meet your needs. We don't need to provide additional resources or support outside of the classroom that we hope we can meet your needs in the classroom. So we'll hit some results, some reflections and next steps, and let's jump in. So this is very busy. I apologize for that, but I think trying to condense the data into one slide so you can kind of see a picture of the year makes a lot of sense. So this top piece is fall, winter, and spring iReady results. That's our screening tool. That's our benchmark tool. We do that 3 times a year for all students. iReady uses a 5-level system to assess based on state standards, on Common Core standards. So mid and on is basically you're at or above grade level. Early on, you're very close to approaching it. Then you have 1 grade level below, 2 grade levels below, and 3 grade levels below. This comparison shows District 59 compared to Illinois, compared to the national. All school districts, kids who are taking the same assessment. Very interesting component of this as we completed our pulling this together. Over 2 million more kids were added to the iReady database from fall to spring, which is a lot of kids. So that, there's a lot of kids in that system, a lot of districts that are accessing it. So when we focus on spring, just to explain how this looks, this 12 means from winter to spring, we increased by 12 percentage points in mid or on grade level. The 22 is from fall, 5% to 27. That's 22 percentage points increase from fall to winter. So you can see we compare really closely nationally across all of those levels. It's very closely Illinois-wise, but not quite, especially at that top level. And then this is the historic piece. This is them saying pre-COVID, this is what our database was telling us. So you can see when you compare whether it's District 59, Illinois, or nationally, we're still not back to where we were. Then this bottom piece is taking that branching minds KPI, the 80%, and saying, where are we at? So we're ending the year at 63.6% of our kids fell into tier 1, 20.3% in tier 2, and 16.1% in tier 3. And this is all math, just to review. This is all math. And you can see how that fell across fall to winter to spring. So you'll see we stalled out, my words, from winter to spring. We maintained our progress from fall to spring, but we lost a little bit of ground from winter to spring. We have lots of ideas on that, but I'd rather not make excuses. I don't know that they're excuses, but we have some thoughts on maybe the why behind that.
Before you continue, so I just want clarification. So if we look at the winter 15% for CCSD for mid or on grade level,
yes,
that was at that point in time, or is that based on end of year?
At that point of time, it's again, this is an end of year assessment. So in the fall, 5% of our kids were at or above grade level in the fall.
For the end
In
of
the
the year,
winter, for end of the year target, 15% were at or
Okay.
above grade level. And now in the spring, 27% are at or above grade level.
Okay.
I thought this was very interesting. I spent a lot of time looking it over. The only thing that bothered me is that there's just too many of them that are 1, 2, or 3 years below grade level.
We would agree.
And it really bothers me that the only good thing about that is we're practically with the national level. We're pretty even with that, but that doesn't make it any better just because the national level is
agreed.
near us.
And that's why you've seen a lot of our actions these past few years about creating what you need systems, intervention systems, and trying to move those pieces. As a great example, actually, Dr. Ossel asked me, when you look at tier 3 and you say, okay, we decreased minus 2.4 percentage points from, we went from 18.5 to 16.1. That's 121 kids. So 121 kids moved out of tier 3, most likely into tier 3, although sometimes we see kids move to tier 1.
And the thing is, you can't place any blame because it's not any particular group or person
Absolutely.
or whatever fault. But when we spend all this time talking about equity, I'd rather spend more time talking about why is this happening and what can we do to improve it. That to me is our job.
I think, Marnell, there's two things that I'll answer on that. One, we hired additional math resource teachers for every school. We realized that the math was a weak spot. We have resource teachers that specifically specify the work on the math goal. And we've also implemented a new math curriculum this last fall too. So that's going to take, I'm not going to say it's an excuse, but it's the first year of this new math curriculum. And it's a 3-year implementation, as I understand it.
The point is, as I say, that I'm not blaming or haranguing any particular group or whatever. It's just that we have to really concentrate on this more than anything else.
But I don't think it's one or the other. They're not exclusive. Like you can do.
Obviously we got to do everything, but
Yeah.
but to have this many people 1, 2, or 3 years below grade level is not good.
And I think the correlation between the equity issues that we're talking about and our student outcomes are very meaningful. So when we're talking about class size, transportation times, access to resources within a given school, how many students are being served within a given school, those impact these directly. We know that based on research. So those are the things that we want to correct to the greatest extent possible, so that then we find out the why, the real why, and we can address it.
The thing is, what we do now is not necessarily what we did 30 years ago or whatever. When my kids were in school, there were sometimes 28 kids in the classroom or more. You wouldn't think about having that today. I mean, once we get up to 25, we're all up, you know.
Still happening.
So it's just, there's just changes.
So one last comment, a great question about how does this compare to last year came up. So we are working on pulling that data together, a couple pieces just to clarify. So one, last year we didn't have this 80% goal. So when we work with Branchy Minds, because they are not a data hosting site, they purge every year kids who move out of the system. So as we started to pull, I shouldn't say last year, I should say 2 years ago. Sorry, we're in 22, 23. In 19, 20, 21, any 8th graders or kids who moved out, they're no longer in the system. So when we compare and when we share this out, we'll put something in the Friday update, we'll clarify that. But we lost about 1,000 kids. So when we compare 2021 to 21, 22, there's about 1,000 less kids in that mix. Also, and what's great about math, we have iReady both of those years. With reading, we had iStation 2 years ago. So we can compare, but we're comparing 2 different assessments and 2 different norm groups. So we'll have some nice bullets to clarify that, but I wanted to highlight that piece.
And Tom, before you go on, so this is for this year, right? So I see growth from fall to winter to spring.
Correct.
When these students come back next year, their new goal is a year higher, right? So there's always this summer reset, basically, right?
Yes, I think.
And so really the big question is, do we sustain the same population moving up?
Got it.
In the next.
Yeah. What's our status when we come back in the fall? I think from an assessment team perspective, we've had some discussions. Again, maybe some will assume this is an excuse, but one of our questions is, what's the level of engagement kids have in the spring after a spring full of assessments? We have access testing, we have IIR testing, we have ISA testing, and then we have benchmarking testing. Some of our assumption, to be honest, about the winter growth was, one, we had all of our kids back in school for the first time in a couple years, and that was the only assessment that we had right before winter break. So schools could focus in on that, talk to their kids about that. In the spring, we basically came off of 6 weeks of pretty much nonstop assessments, especially for 3rd through 8th graders. And then honestly, some of the feedback from staff with 8th graders are, I got 2 weeks to go and I'm taking an assessment. And when we see some of the numbers, like 6 minutes to do an hour in assessment, but we've talked a lot about what does fall to fall look like, especially you have the summer, but what fall to fall could be a good measure of what the system is impacting across the board, because that data is a consistent measure to bring, and the environment is very consistent, and it's the only assessment in the fall. So as we move into next year, into year 2, we'll look at ways to share and show that data. So then what we did with each was basically just take all of those different groups. So we look at grade level. So you read, now I got to reorient you. So now we're moving across. So we've got the 5 levels are on top, each grade level is on the side, and then you move across to each one. And then over here is how that relates to the KPI target. So the positive piece from my perspective, when you see mid on and early on grade levels, you see consistent growth from fall to winter to spring across to every grade level. It starts to get a little smaller as we move to the upper grades. As we look at those tier 1 results, that's the KPI piece. You can see we have that variance of a little ups, a little downs. Our levels, we range from 53.4% at the 4th grade level to 71.4% at grade 2. And our goal would be to hit 80% on that target. So that's how the grade level process flows. And while I see this piece, what's interesting is you see how the national percentiles play out. So 4th grade, that's our lowest performing group. They still, by the end of the year, had 45% in the green. Yet how that played out, again, because there's 7 million kids taking this assessment, and how that impact flows through the system. And the piece I just want to highlight, because we want to highlight some great things about 4th grade, went from 24%, 3 grades below, to 10. So they might not be in the green, but they're moving out of the red. So then we'll next highlight, this is our race and ethnicity. Because of how the data is collected at iReady's level, you have the federal race and then the Hispanic ethnicity piece. So we try to break that out. Again, same idea, just flows across. You can see the variance here when we look at our KPI target from 44.9% to 85.7%.
What does KPI stand for?
That key performance indicator.
Key performance.
So our key performance indicators, we want everybody at 80%.
The goal. That's our goal.
That's our goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say this is about 1,000 kids from the federal race piece, where the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander is 22 kids. So when we see some of that swing, it can be tied to the numbers of kids, but just an awareness item. And then one thing we highlight and talk about a lot is achievement gaps. So when you look at Hispanic yes versus Hispanic no, there's a pretty big swing in that large 30% gap. Then we have those other demographics, free and reduced, multilingual, IEP, male, female. I just want to highlight the multilingual piece because we've included the former multilingual. That's been a great question from the board, but just understand those kids are also in the know.
When I was studying this report, I noticed that the females and the males were just about equal. There wasn't a great difference between the genders.
You would assume they should be equal. But yes, I think it swings male on the math side, female on the reading side.
Yeah, pretty close.
Again, you can see how those ranges play out across each of our group with the KPI. Again, this is a good highlight of the achievement gap. So we see great, really solid growth, but it's not as significant as we see in some of the non-groups, no free and reduced, not multilingual, not IEP.
Yeah, so this struck me, the socioeconomic effect, the top two lines, not free and reduced lunch is almost at the 80.
Yep.
Right. And the other group has made a significant gain this year, but is still.
Yeah. We're talking about 3,000 kids in the free and reduced group and about 2,500 in the non-free and reduced group. So I think to the earlier comments, you can see, so if I'm in a school, I recall being a principal when the No Child Left Behind first accountability system came out. And I was at Claremont and said, well, I have very low income and I don't have a dual language program and I don't have a lot of kids moving in and out. I was pretty safe just based on the demographics at my school. And I knew that from day one. We worked really hard and did great things, but the reality of demographics really impact these results. And then the last piece, which, this has been a debate. We started with our committee of the whole. We haven't normally shared school data, but I think we've crossed that divide in the right way and in a good way. And so here is that same information by school, the iReady piece across each, and then how that plays out with the KPI target. Elementary's on the top, and then just tried to group the junior highs so we could see them together.
And Tom, I think the significant part about this and why we felt that we could show it by school is because you had to have the context of the demographics and everything else. Because if you just look at this without any other context, you're going to draw false conclusions about our schools. And it's really, really important that we don't do that, that we look at our student makeups within each of our schools and what are those needs within each of them and how do we best address them.
So again, you can see we have quite a range here on the math side from 48% tier 1 to 86.8% tier 1. So that is math. Any questions or follow-ups from that quick review?
Enjoyed it.
All right, let's move on to reading. So kind of the organization piece is very similar. So you can see as a district, when we get into the spring, again, nationally, we compare quite well. Not quite as well with Illinois as a whole, but still that growth. You could see from fall to spring, 21, 21. So we appreciate seeing that. We see that 5% there. So we had in the green, we had a 26 percentage point growth from fall to spring, which outpaces all Illinois and nationally. You can see then how that flows. Again, we had that nice, really great fall to winter. Results wise, I think we had a great fall to winter to spring in general. And then it just balanced out. We maintained. Tricia Senni, our coordinator of assessment, keeps telling me we maintained, which there's nothing wrong with maintaining growth. You can see how that then flows through the year and then how it compares to that historical piece. Okay. So then grade levels, same idea. So you see the grade levels flow across the course of the year. You see good movement out of the red, pink, and yellow and into the green.
Can you put a net next time in those zeros for the grade, for like the kindergarten, two grade levels below or 3 grade levels? Because I had to call Dr. Sager on that because they keep confusing me.
Oh, you know what? That's a great point. I should have mentioned that earlier. So yes, we will do that in the future. So the reality of kindergarten, you can't be more than a year behind in kindergarten, but it appears like we have none there. That's thanks for pointing that out. I should have caught that. So yes, that's NA. There's no way you can be 3 years behind in second grade. So thanks for pointing that out. Hopefully Corey and Tricia are listening and making notes. And then you can see how that flows across the spring by grade level. So these ranges are a lot tighter at the reading level. You can see we go from a low of 63.9 to a high of 73.9.
You know, a lot of, can I ask a question? A lot of times we talk about the importance of the early education. So is it safe to assume that if, for instance, the kindergartners came in at a higher percentage, at grade level, that the domino would continue, or is it?
So we have to believe that, ongoing instruction that meets kids' needs, when interventions are needed early on and meets their needs, that those numbers, really that's the whole goal behind the 80%. 80% needs met in the classroom, 10% or 15% through a tier 2 intervention support piece, and then 5% most intensive tier 3. If we can get that, these down to, if we can get this into the 20% range, we should be on that path. You can see the difference when you start to look at the upper levels, 6 and 7, when you have 30% of your kids are in tier 3, your system has to look completely different.
Yeah.
So that's the whole goal in trying to shift that piece. Great question. So then when we get into the race ethnicity demographics, you can see how that flows across our different groups. Demographics.
You can spend a lot of time just studying this.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the realities of this, what's been so great to share the data in this way and the consistency is you start to build a big picture of where we're at as a district. And so when we say, 2 years ago, we need a new math program, well, the data was pretty clear. We needed a new math program. And this is organizational data. While we look at all the groups, this is how the system, really the board and leadership can impact the whole system. And then as we get to the schools, we have 2 schools over the 80% goal, 2 schools in the 70s, and everyone else in the 50s. Oh, I'm sorry, 4 schools in the 70s, looking at the middle school.
It's Claremont all mixed together.
This is all kids.
All kids.
All kids.
So it's difficult to tell because they have a split population.
So when schools analyze their data, they'll look at if they have programming in their building, they can disaggregate their data and really break it out and look at it in that way. We do that at the district level, but schools can really get down to that piece and see the impact or where kids are at.
This is our second year of the reading program, correct?
Yeah, not in reading,
Okay.
right?
We're working on that.
We're still in that
We're evaluating
process.
that one.
We're
Okay.
evaluating that piece.
Yeah.
We'll be starting year 2 in our updated math program. And using iReady as an assessment, we'll all be in year 3 for math and year 2 for reading. Okay. So just as an assessment team, we sat down and just shared our, kind of brainstormed some reflections. So on the positive side, it's great to be average and look like the nation, and pretty consistently throughout the year, we've maintained that. We saw consistent growth as a district in our subgroups from fall to spring across the board. We saw consistent growth towards that 80% KPI target in math and reading. What's been very impressive for me is how much our staff have really used this data, whether that's at the leadership level, synergy team level, classroom teacher level. I knew we were getting to another place when I visited a grade level team meeting, and they were in iReady talking about their kids and their status.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just continuing to build on using data to make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunities for growth, we're still pretty far away from that 80% as a system. We flattened out or had negative growth from winter to spring compared to the fall to winter. Those achievement gaps still very, very, 30, 40, 50 percentage point differences stand out. And we need to continue to build on just using and having access to data in a way where we can make decisions efficiently and effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So next steps, we'll continue to analyze this data. Actually, one of the reasons we actually pushed up the spring assessment timeframe, because we wanted data before kids left. So schools could start planning for intervention groups, especially at the junior high, because that's part of the schedule. So kids could be in their intervention classes or their needs identified. Same at the elementary, and to help with staffing. So we'll continue that process. There's a couple of those grade levels that stand out. 4th grade in math really stands out as what's going on, that my word's a little behind the similar grade levels. So we really spent the fall doing a lot of that as a district MTSS team, and we'll continue.
Mm-hmm.
Again, using this data to inform and monitor our instructional planning and the intervention process. Really helping for planning. This data helped us plan and will continue to help us plan for the school year we're in, and monitoring that progress towards the KPI. I am interested with the fall data and how we present and share and really get a chance to see a year-long piece of time. And then really we're going to have some internal discussions around the benchmarking process. And, we'd really need to look at that spring, just with the intensity and assessment fatigue I think our kids and staff have after a lot of time spent testing, which is not our goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Questions, comments, follow-ups?
Just a comment. I think kind of hitting on what Joe said earlier, I think a lot of times you look at the district as a whole, and I'm just going to very simple example. If every school had the same exact textbook, why are they not operating the same, or why are they not performing the same? And it's good to see the actual data, and hitting on what Joe said, just even at the free and reduced lunch level, of how that impacts those scores. Because we can look at the numbers and we can see, I think it was Bird was in the 50s when we were trying to hit our 80% goal. Forest View was at 83%. What is the difference there? Ideally yes, they should all be performing well, but looking at the data to see what students need at those schools, how the community is built differently in each of these schools, to get them the resources that they need, to get the teachers the resources that they need to help those kids perform their best.
That's great.
I do have one follow-up for you, Tom, is the national averages you're showing us.
Yes.
Can you get that by demographics? Kind of like you broke out the free and reduced.
Unfortunately, we've
No.
pushed iReady for that. They currently don't do that, but I will say we've partnered well with them. 2 years ago, they didn't report any demographics. And this past year they did. So we continue to push. We want to see all the data. That's not something they've gotten to us yet, but we absolutely want to see it, and we'll continue to ask.
Okay, thank you.
So I just have one comment, which is I'm happy to see the data independent of what it shows. We show it, right?
Mhm.
Whether good or bad.
Yep.
And I think that's the key is we want to see the same data again next year, right? And see how things change.
Yeah, I guess the piece of reflection or feedback you could see over the course of the year, we've modified each time we've come to the board. I'd be interested in your feedback, whenever of does this format meet your needs? It meets my needs, but it doesn't matter if it meets my needs. But if that format, that structure makes sense, that unless we have other suggestions, then we can really align and keep that process rolling consistently.
And I think that's really good because that's one of the things we discuss, and I'll give Dr. Bresnahan credit and you credit because we're going to do a disservice to the board and the community if we're just sugarcoating everything as far as like, look how great the district is doing, and you can put a lot of numbers on there, and I'm not a numbers guy. Joe is, and he will catch it if you try to put one by him. But it is really good to see that these are our goals. And we're getting there, and it's not just look how great or the sunshine view of everything.
But I also think it's a good idea to show that, hey, we're making good progress to those goals.
Mhm.
Hey, here's where we're at. Here's where we want to be. Here's how far we've come.
Mhm.
But also says we got to keep going to get to this next level.
Absolutely. And if not, what actions are we taking to address that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Item 6.0, consent agenda. Can I have a motion?
You want to do that one?
Want me to do it? Okay, I move to approve the consent agenda. 6.01, approval of minutes, prior meetings. 6.02, disbursements resolution. 6.03, acceptance of financial reports. 6.04, acceptance of recommendations, human resources. And 6.05, approval to destroy 18-month-old or older closed session recordings.
There's one more, Mardell. There's
One more, Mardell. Don't
You don't have, you might, we added late agenda. There's
Which
item
one-
6.0 here. I'll give you this.
It's right there.
Can you read it down there, Mardell?
6.06.
We added.
Oh, I don't have it on here and I
I know.
can't read that, so. Okay, 6.06, amendment to the performance-based superintendent's contract. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
Comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Okay. Lang is absent. Mencia?
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. Reed?
Aye.
Sager?
Aye.
Schumacher?
Aye.
And Espino?
Aye.
And the motion passes.
Before we move on, we have Mr. Dominic Milano with us in the audience. He's been very patient audience member. So you just approved him as our new assistant principal at Friendship Junior High. Mr. Milano comes to us with a wealth of experience in special education, as well as experience in a assistant principal role. And we are very excited to welcome him to Friendship Junior High and to that leadership team, and for the district leadership team as well. So welcome.
Welcome.
Now's when you give the speech, Mr. Milano. Yeah. I'm just kidding.
Item 7.0, discussion items, the 2022-23 tentative budget and long-term financial plan. Mr. O'Connor?
Great to be here. Did we want to go over the PowerPoint or we're just going to go over the short piece?
I think we probably want to go over the PowerPoint so everyone.
Okay. It's on the presentation. It's on the agenda right there, 22-23. There you go. Thank you, Dr. Bresnahan, Board of Education. So this is the preliminary budget. And before we begin, just to keep in mind that this is a living, breathing document.
Oh, Tom's sharing the pointer.
I've never used one of these before, so I'll just put it aside so I don't hurt anybody, including myself. At that point, I will learn now. So yes, the budget and preliminary guide, just so you know, this is a living, breathing document. All right, this is something that we're just beginning to look at. I give Janet Rousseau a ton of credit. I know that she was in a hurry to leave, but there's a lot to this that I can't wait to actually talk about. So here's the budget adoption process. It is typically exactly what you're seeing here. But the piece I like to share is that the business office works all year round, working with different departments to ensure that they have needs satisfied so that the district can go into its next phase of whatever it's working on. So that's something that I really want people to think about. It is a year-round process while you're running the current budget. So it's a crazy time. And it also has to work with the strategic plan. I put the 4 goals up there. I don't know what with the 4 goals, but I do have the key KPIs, as Tom mentioned earlier. These are items that we do look at when we start talking to teams. And then here's another piece that I wanted the district to think about. So there is a fund balance policy. It's 4.25. The district shall maintain an aggregate of no less than the 50 to 60% range in the ed, operations and maintenance, transportation, and working cash funds. So that means that whatever you're budgeting for, the expenses should be at least 50 to 60% covered in our fund balance. So if you look at what our projection is for the end of the fiscal year for the prior one, we have $109,968,997 approximate. Our budgeted expenses for those funds are almost 121 million, which shows that the current operating fund balance is 91%. Although it is healthy, there is a lot of planning. There's a lot of oversight that's occurring, and it gives us opportunities to just go about the trends and the ideas that we discuss as an SLT, as a board. So typically, we share the revenue sources, local, state, and federal. Property taxes, as we do know, that's typically 82% of the district with CPPRTs. Corporate personal property replacement tax is essentially how much corporations are going to be paying in response to what the state asks for in terms of a tax, and then they divvy it back up to municipalities. It was higher than usual last year. We're not anticipating it being as high as it was before. District fees, which you'll know, they are waived. Donations and grants and interest earnings, which we are anticipating those being higher than in years past. The state has evidence-based funding. We do get a nice sum of money from it, but we are one of the districts that are the least funded compared to others. Preschool for all grants, transportation grants, and other state grants. And then federal. This is the one piece that I think people need to realize is the American Rescue Plan, which is also known as ESSER 3. It's a one-time grant that has not been, although we do have money, some allocations to it. And once we get things submitted, that is approximately $8.6 million. Granted, though, it's a one-time grant. And that one-time revenue will go into this fiscal year 23.
Which one is the one-time grant?
The American Rescue Plan.
Okay.
Yeah. And then IDEA, it's Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and Medicaid, meal programs, and other federal grants as well.
Mm-hmm.
Are any of these leftovers from the pandemic? When we got...
The American Rescue Plan is.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the assumptions are, as you see, the local revenue is 82% of revenue, typically being from local resources, but the American Rescue Plan changes that up a little bit. The one thing that is on everybody's mind in school business is the Cook County tax issues that we have. Cook County is currently anticipating having a 6-month delay in their tax the bills and then the payments to schools. The district right now is fortunate enough that we do have the money in the fund balance so that it wouldn't affect us. Other districts have to go out for what they call as tax anticipation warrants, which means you take your taxes and you bet them, you hedge them against what you get from a bank or from whoever you're loaning it from, and then you're charged interest. So we are in a fortunate situation, but it may mess with our cash flow just a little bit. And if that does, you will hear from me. As for levy receipts, we typically do 23% from the 2021 and then 77% of 2022's levies. That money comes into the district funding as well for this current year. Another thing to think about, our CPI, I don't think anyone has to be reminded about inflation, 7% for December CPI for our districts. School fees are phased or waived. And then our interest earnings increases have, we've already seen some real positive cash flow. We've looked at, I think, right as of right now, $24 million have been invested in a 5-year ladder with our rates looking at over 3 compared to less than 1/10% in years past. So we're in good shape right that.
Our rates are 2 and 3%.
It's the book amount, so it's about 3.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've done a lot.
That's pretty good today.
And then what we'd like to do is we will take that money and then we're going to reinvest it, and we're just going to keep it going and going so that it can help us fund for different programming over the years. Also, the state, again, we're tier 4, which is the lowest tier when it comes to receiving evidence-based funding from the state. We receive over $12 million. And then there may be other potential increases from state and categorical grants. Right now, we're saying they're flat. However, the state and the Illinois General Assembly committed to another $350 million to be put into evidence-based funding, as well as some of the categorical grants. The other thing is federal. Right now, we have them as flat, and we have the ARP. But President Biden actually, the House Appropriations Committee voted to allocate $86.7 billion to education this year, which is an increase of $10 billion more than it was before. But it's only at the House piece. You have to wait for it to go through the entire process. So that's what we're waiting on as well. If you really want to kind of look into this here, though, this is kind of where I really enjoy. Property taxes are at 70.2%, and other local are at 7.7%. Evidence-based funding, which you mentioned was the state funding, as well as other state, you're looking at 10.6%, and then federal's 11.4%, but it's inflated because of the $8.6 million that ARP is being added to for this current fiscal year.
70.2% comes from property taxes. How does that go with what we've been used to? I mean, is it up or down or?
It's only the only reason why it's down is because the only reason why it's down compared to the other funds is because of that ARP.
Because of the what?
The ESSER 3 ARP being the $8.6 million. So that kind of waters down what property taxes are. Because between the property taxes and other local, you look at it, it's about 82% typically. So we're pretty fortunate. Oops. This next slide, I got to give Mr. Reed a lot of credit on this one and Dr. Sager. So if I looked at fiscal year 23, right now, the EAV that we can find that is most up to date is fiscal year 20. So if you look at 10 years before that, residential is actually pretty stable in terms of the percentage of it making up the revenues for the school district. It's more commercial and industrial. However, when you look at the rest of Cook County's average, it's almost like an inverse to flip. So when we talk about the district having relevant resources that are adequate and can provide for great opportunities, this is what people should know about. I keep saying knowing about because I feel like this is stuff that people don't necessarily look for. But as a resident of District 59, you're less burdened by taxes because of the commercial industrial base that we have within our borders. As for expenses, salaries are, of course, like contracts and increments, any overtime. Benefits, we have medical, dental, life, retirement, purchase services, there's contracted services, there's professional learning, anything that if Mr. Tiarina's team needs that is kind of out of our hands when it comes to some of building needs, supplies, equipment, and other. Some of it's pretty straightforward, and I'll explain a little bit more of it in a second. So here's our highlights for the expenses. The Ed Fund, it's going to reflect classroom needs. We did a lot of homework working with SLT and other groups in the buildings. We knew that the contracts and negotiated agreements, those increases are built in. We looked at the resignations and retirements. Thank you to Mr. Vittori's information on that. FTE is also based on the resource allocation that was passed by the Board of Education. As for benefits, after negotiations with the carriers, our medical PPO is actually down 0.1% compared to almost 7 to 8% what they were initially going to give us. The medical HMO is a 6% increase. That was going to be 10, maybe 11% almost. Dental's up 6.2%. We're waiting on life. The TRS state level has been 9% flat, and then the federal TRS is an increase of, it's 0.18, so it's not really going to affect us that much. However, the contracts, right? Purchase services, an increase in food services is 7% because that contract, according by the state, so it's not even anything we necessarily do, it is based on CPI from December. So that's why you see 7. Workers' comp actually came in a little under at 5.43%. And then other purchase service line items, we look at the operations piece that we've spent money on. A lot of, I wouldn't say necessarily professional development, but we are bringing in a new curriculum, as well as with transportation. Some of that really changed things up this year compared to last year when we looked over the numbers. Supplies, Mr. Gray, thank you so much for your technology financial management, like your plan that you do. That really helps us with planning. And we've been looking at the supplemental instructional materials, which Dr. Ossel here, Ms. Savage, it's very helpful that they're very open. They discuss what we think about what we need, and then they put it all together. Again, it's an arduous process, but it's so worth it. Oh, please. There you go. O&M, we don't have to go through the bottom part of the benefits, but it also includes resignations and retirements, the recent contract negotiation. Purchase services, there was an increase in workers' comp and liability insurance, and of course, inflation. We've seen different companies and groups going up 8%, 9%. And I'll be honest with you, when you see the numbers for the budget, you'll realize, for example, energy costs, we looked at anywhere from 20 to 50% of an increase. And when you look at gasoline, when you're looking at it's just gas, natural gas, electricity, in the district, we didn't want to be caught off guard with that. So just an FYI. Again, with the supplies we just talked about, and then equipment, we're still talking about purchasing 2 maintenance vehicles.
Have we already okayed those? Those are.
We haven't done that yet.
They have or have.
They have not.
Have not.
They have not. But those are they're in here for now. We approved of some my first year. I guess that was, yeah. And we never saw much of anything because it was either the microchip shortage or we looked at like there was something or other, right? So we're waiting patiently. As for the transportation fund, the contracted agreements, we see that it's a 10% increase for regular ed transportation, and special ed transportation was a 9.75% increase. So it would be really interesting to see what happens with our next year when we have to go out to bid. Of course, gasoline and inflation were part of the reasons why, as well as the fact that there's a driver shortage. So the transportation companies are doing what they can, and part of that is increasing the salaries of their staff. As for the debt service fund, this is something that the Finance and Facilities Committee talked a little bit about. This is a celebration, and I'll show you a graph in a few, but The 2020 debt issuance will retire in fiscal year 28. There is only one bond left for the district. It'll be done at that time. We consider we transfer interest to the ed fund, just so you know. IMRF rate is 9.29%. And the working cash, that's about a little over $12 million right now. That's kind of like the emergency fund if there's ever something that we really need to get going. And there's no need to touch that at all this year.
It's still 6 years we got left on that bond.
Correct. But we're making gains, right?
We're closing on, you know.
We sure are. The capital projects fund, we have it budgeted for approximately $7.5 million for every single thing that needed to be done in a 10-year facilities plan. So we have that money, and I'll share with you in a second what that is. As for health, life, safety fund, we're kind of diverting what the revenues and expenses are from out of there because it doesn't have the same flexibility as a capital projects fund. Capital projects you can do not just health, life, safety stuff that the state allows you to do, but you can also put architect fees, regular construction costs, other operational costs that you can that's available. So that's where if you see that down the line, that's kind of the strategy for the district. So Mardell, this is what I know that you were talking about the bond payments right here. This is the remainders. We pay twice a year. So we have one coming up at September 1st of 2022. And then March 1st of 2023 will hit principal. So if you look through all of this, again, the 2014 and 2015 bonds are retired. Final payment for this one from 2020 will be March 1st of 2028. At that time, when that occurs, we can do one of those celebrations and whatnot. So this to me is a major celebration. Here's the capital projects for fiscal year 23. And you think about an environment for students learning. Air handling units, making sure that all is replaced and taken care of or refurbished. LED lighting in our buildings, seal coating our parking lots. I can't believe the parking lots that we're seeing right now being put together, taken care of over the summer, and you compare it with some of our neighbors, we're in great shape. We're milling and overlaying the parking lots, making them look good. Water booster pumps so that we can actually push in the water if we need to for our buildings so that, just sanitation. Fire panel replacements, which is an HLS item. The sanitary lines after what happened in homes. Mr. Tiarina has been hitting up each building and making sure the sanitary lines are up to date. We'll have our PA systems in every single building done at the end of next summer. This also includes the John Jay retention. As we've seen, the parking lot is like its own little ocean. So that's going away. And then, of course, finishing up the Friendship Gym. I'd like to note this, though. That's $7.5 million of, actually, it's a little over $9 million of the work, but we've spent a certain amount of it in FY22. None of this work will be completed by a bond. The district has taken a lot of reserves to put them in this capital project 60 fund so they can do projects like this so that we can be fiscally responsible. As you saw, 91% of our dollars, and we are funded. So it's our job to make sure that with whatever we need to spend, we do it, but we plan it diligently. And I feel that we are in a good spot as a team here. If you look at the expenses, there's salaries are at 58%. There's benefits, just 12.5%. Purchase services, again, how we've mentioned, that being more or less, it's not just professional development. It's more of maybe we need to get contractors out here. That's a lot of it, as well as the transportation increases for some of the purchase services that we're seeing. For example, like you saw, 10% just for Reg Ed for transportation, and that's already an $8 million line item. Supplies are about 6%. Capital outlays 5.5%, and there's other objects. So here's the operating funds that the state cares about. If you look at this, Education is a $2.1 million surplus is what we're anticipating. O&M working cash is relatively negligible, but transportation is at a $2.3 million deficit for this current fiscal year. Now, here's why. When you look at the reimbursements that we receive from the state of Illinois, they look back a year as to how much you've used for transportation, and transportation wasn't used much. So they look back that year, plus you're seeing a 10% increase in transportation, which means you're seeing a hole of this magnitude. Now, the thing is, we have over 100% fund balance in the transportation fund alone. So we'll be fine. But we still find a way to balance it. And that's where you're seeing that operating total being $366,000 in the black. But that's what the issue is right now, is the transportation fund taking a hit due to, with COVID and us planning and anticipating routes, field trips, extracurriculars, the whole 9 yards.
The operating funds year over year for fiscal year 2022, that was also in the black, right? Is it a small, are we seeing the number going down, or is it pretty stable?
No, actually, it's pretty similar. To be honest, Mr. Mencia, the reason why I think that we're in better shape than 366,000, but we're being very careful because of inflation. We're anticipating inflation being that much rougher again next year. And I think that's what's really hit us a bit. Also transportation, this is assuming that everything's a full go, which we do anticipate. And O&M's actually pretty high this year, but I think I made the mistake of telling Mr. Tiarina to think about his wish list.
What is working cash?
So working cash, it's a fund that you can use to borrow against. And some districts what they'll do is, like, let's say they're short in one of their other funds. They'll say, okay, well, we're going to take $2 million from the working cash, and it'll come to, like, let's say the ed fund. And then once you get the money, you put it back into that working cash fund. Some districts can abolish it. You can do that as well. And then what they do is they take the 12 million and they disperse it to another fund. It's honestly, for us, it's a cushion of sorts for that 12 million, just in case. I know that that's something that's been utilized by the district in years past.
Yeah, I was going to say, way back when we were in really bad financial situation, and the administrator in charge of finance at that time was very smart, and he established a working cash fund, which we've used ever since then, and it's been definitely well used. It's like an extra bank account.
So again, we mentioned this is all about equitable facilities and programming, getting every child an opportunity to do better, to increase within their means. Looking at key performance indicators, that's something that I need to do, for not just on my end, but for my teammates as well, because it's up to the operations team to support them. The emerging issues, including legislation, that's something that's another job in itself. We will be updating assumptions as they change. I'll have a new 5 to 10 year plan with our financials and at our August 1st meeting, so you can see how we are still looking positive for years to come. And we'll just continue updating our 10-year facilities plan so that we are ready to improve or to take care of facilities when time permits. But again, the last thing I'd like to say is, when you talk about our fund balance, the district's in great shape. 91% of its operating fund balance is 91% covered. So let's just say hypothetically the state decides not to pay us. We get no tax money, no federal money, no anything. We'd have 91% of those dollars ready to go in our bank account. That doesn't happen very often. So it's about being strategic.
How much have we gone into the working cash fund to use the money?
Under me?
Are we going into, we're not going?
I don't anticipate us using it
Because that's supposed to be an emergency fund.
Yeah. No, right now, the plan that we've discussed is putting any sort of excess into the 60 fund. So then we can do facility work, and then it can work within educational means, and that should alleviate any bond discussion for a long time.
If I'm not wrong, I think that was Dan Cash at the time who established that fund for us.
Good name.
An interesting name
Yeah.
for the situation. Dan Cash.
Dan Cash.
Yeah,
The
better than Ron O'Connor.
yeah. The
And he was smart.
the district can control its spending and what it spends money on. Are there ways for us to generate revenue, like not fundraising, but applying for grants, those kind of things? What can the district do to generate revenue?
We do continue to with grants.
Mhm.
I know in SLT, the team is very much up with whatever they can do with that. I've seen other ways of doing it in the past. I actually worked with somebody where we took our surpluses and we loaned them to another district,
Mhm.
and then we received
Sure.
a percentage of that back. I'm really curious to see how our investment interest is going to be,
Mhm.
because it's an opportune time to strike, because we've seen the rates going up with the feds, and we're jumping in at the right time. It's really exciting to see. So for the next 5 years, at least, we're going to see some good revenues in there. Last year it was about between $100,000 and $200,000 in interest off of over $100 million.
Were we ever a landlord? I don't know. Maybe Tom, if you know, like, did we ever lease properties to the park district when we, back when we had the 21? Sure.
I don't think it's so much a case of us making money. It's a case of us not spending money for things that we don't actually need. And I've gotten a couple calls in the last several months from people who said that they see tables going in quite a bit in some of the schools. Why are we buying all these tables for the schools?
I really have no idea what anyone's talking about.
Well, I don't know either, but these people seem to know something about it. So that's why they called me. And then I must say, I was over election day. I was election judge. I was at one of the schools, and all of a sudden these two men came in and started to take all kinds of things that were in the room. And I raced over to find out who they were and what they were doing. And turns out that they were installing lights that had been bought and were stored there in the room that we were in for the election. And they were installing new lights in this school. So who determines when and then also I've noticed when I was going through the expenses this time for the meeting, there were quite a few desks and tables and chairs and so forth. Who determines when we buy furniture or change the lights or do whatever in the schools?
Finance and Facilities Committee. We do that. We've talked about the lights. That's how we voted on it.
That's the finance committee that does that?
For the lighting, yeah, the project was discussed several times.
Because I wouldn't let these two men go down the hall with this stuff. I said, no, you can't do that.
Well, I'm glad you stopped them. Ms. Schumacher, thanks for stopping them. But I mean, on a positive note, before we go any further, and then I'll be done. At Clearmont, a neighbor did come out to talk to Danny Taylor, who's one of our buildings and grounds people. And he went there, talks to Danny and said, I got this from Albert. He goes, it's about time that something's being done with that property. You guys are doing a great job. So
it wasn't at Claremont. It was at Broad.
That's fine. And I can deal with any negativity, but I do know we're doing what's best for kids.
Yeah. And I mean, we look at back to Tom's presentation, these buildings are 60, 70 years old going on, and they need to have that routine maintenance, because I don't know what the life of one of these buildings is. Eventually a couple, it's going to be 100 years, Yeah. We keep the buildings open. We keep the kids in the schools.
Definitely.
I'd rather spend a couple million refurbishing a building and improving it instead of building a new building, which is going to cost millions and millions and millions of dollars. I think there's the 10-year plan that's on the website, isn't it?
Correct.
Showing what we're trying to accomplish this year, I think will be a benefit to the district. I think the key thing right now is we're going to try and improve on the security that we have within it's going to kind of be our focus for next summer. based on what's been happening recently. We do have secure buildings, and all our buildings are secure, and doors are locked. But I think, what else more can we do? And that's what we're going to start looking at for next summer.
I must say that I did go down to the office and check to make sure that everything was on the up and up, because let's face it, they came in the door where the election was going on. They didn't come in the front door. They came in through the election door. So they were interlopers as far as I was concerned. I'm protecting your taxes. Pardon me? That's fine. But I mean, I didn't know who these two people were who came in to take this. I was on the case. You're darn right.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
7.02 TRS supplement training plan. I'll do that for Mr. Connor again.
So this is one of those things that we just have to do with the blessing from our attorneys. So we sent the TRS is forcing districts to approve of their supplemental savings plan that they've been trying to push since August of 2018, right? It became law. So we have to offer the plan. We have to have it approved by a board. So I'd like to bring that up for to vote for next month. Sure. Okay, well, okay, so let's put it nicely. So we already have 403B like investments that our staff can put into, almost like a 401k for like the private sector. So TRS wants to get involved in this as well. I think they're going to be they're going to be tagging it with their new tiers, because there's different tiers of TRS teachers. And what it sounds like they're trying to do is we were concerned about the implementation and rollout. So we waited till as long as we could. And we talked to Mr. Delianis, and he agreed with us 100%. And at this point, after looking at some of what TRS has done with the IRS and that's what occurred. They ended up working together. So now we're at that point where TRS is threatening everyone to just do it. And that's kind of where we're at.
If the IRS provides like an FAQ document, can that be shared in the weekly update? I don't want the district to prepare anything, but if there's just kind of like a informal like website or something that we could just look at, I think that'd be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Any additional questions for Mr. O'Connor? Thank you. Item 8.0, action items. Approval of district-wide copier release solutions. Do I have a motion?
All right, I'll do it. Whereas Conica Minolta has provided high-performing copier equipment and quality technology support and services, whereas a proposal was received from Conica Minolta providing a print solution for School District 59 schools and administration buildings at significant savings. Now therefore be it resolved on the 11th day of July 2022, the Board of Education of Community Consolidated School District 59 approved the leasing of 54 multifunctional devices from Conica Minolta for a 4-year lease and maintenance agreement for a monthly rate of $22,901.07.
Do I have a second?
Who's seconding?
Mardell.
Mardell.
Questions, comments? Roll call.
Petrielli, aye. Reed,
Aye.
Sager,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
Espino,
Aye.
Lang is absent, and Mencia. And the motion passes.
Item 8.02, approval EL curricular resource.
I can do it.
Motion by Dr. Sager,
Whereas the Board of Education discussed EL curricular resources on the 13th day of June 2022, be it resolved that on the 11th day of July 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education purchased the following EL curricular resource Connect for grades K through 5 as outlined in the item under the purchase recommendation.
I will second that. Questions, comments? We're gonna get like an update of how this goes, right? Okay, good. Roll call.
Reed,
Aye.
Sager,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
Espino,
Aye.
Lang is absent, Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye, and the motion passes.
Item 8.03, the ratification of the collective bargaining agreement for custodial maintenance cameo staff. I'll make that motion. Be it resolved on the 11th day of July 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education ratify a 2-year contract with its custodial and maintenance cameo employees as presented above. The terms of the agreement is July 1 through July 30th, 2024. The average annual compensation increase for the 2-year agreement is 5.09%.
I'll second that.
So I think this is a win for us, having a
Jason.
2-year contract, so we don't have two contracts coming up within the same fiscal year.
Yeah, speaking of which, thank you for the negotiations team doing 2 contracts this year.
And I got a free lunch on Friday when they had their picnic. Even though they didn't invite me, but I showed up anyways.
Bonus.
Any other questions, comments? Roll call.
Sager,
Aye.
Schumacher,
Aye.
Espino,
Aye.
Lang is absent, Mencia.
Aye.
Petrielli, aye, and Reed,
Aye.
and the motion passes.
Okay. Item 9.0, superintendent reports, strategic plan, department oral reports.
Sure. We don't have too much to discuss this evening, as the focus of our work was really around the equity work that we presented earlier and will continue to be the focus for us. But as we are now officially in year 2 of the strategic plan, we will be revisiting that as an administrative team, identifying our key focus areas for year 2, as well as reconvening our board strategic plan committee so that we could get some input on that and then begin to report out on our focus areas for that work. And I will turn it over to our team for any additional information. Tom has spoken enough tonight. So Dr. Ossel.
I'd like to add to the benchmarking report from earlier this evening. Mardell, you said it beautifully that we could study that data for a very, very long time, and we do. Our district MTSS team has spent the last year very clearly analyzing our data from our students to determine areas of need for interventions. And so we are now in the process of having identified 6 resources that would benefit groups of students needing intervention, purchasing receiving those resources and planning professional development for the staff, mostly interventionists, who will be utilizing them next year. With that, we are also turning to a review process for our junior high social emotional learning resources and the schedule changes that will allow for an increased level of social emotional learning to meet the changing student needs at the middle level.
As we mentioned earlier, we're going to send out not a survey. We will call it something other than that, but we're going to look to get family input regarding the items that were identified as part of our equity enrollment study. So we're hoping to get that out in the next week in order to provide the board with that information prior to the August 1st meeting. So look for that coming out. We'll share that information. We'll share the results. And as Dr. Bresnahan mentioned, we're hoping that that'll serve 2 purposes. It will help to inform families, give some background to the work, remind folks what we've been working on, as well as link to previous board meeting conversations and resources, as well as provide an opportunity for families to give us some input and voice that they have on how things have been impacting their families.
For the Human Resource Department, we have, as you've mentioned, we've been bargaining contracts and hiring administrators for 6 months. We're closing in on finishing that work. I want to thank all of our partners in those success items. We have about 30 openings still for the upcoming school year, and that is actually on par with all of our local districts. Actually, we're doing a little bit better in some areas. So we're starting to see the staffing challenges from the pandemic get a little bit better, but we still have some work to do. So please, within your networks, direct people to our District 59 website, and you can see available opportunities, whether that's for a certified position or a paraprofessional position, nursing positions, and of course, subbing. There are a lot of opportunities to be part of our district's great work.
As I shared at our last board meeting, we continue to be immersed in summer curriculum work across all areas, particularly our specials. And also I'd like to highlight our junior high teachers who have been working on WIN structures connected to what Dr. Ossel was sharing regarding intervention work, as well as enrichment opportunities. We have teams of teachers working on enrichment course offerings for students. And we also have our AVID team that is gearing up and getting ready to prepare for AVID, including a team of teachers heading out to San Francisco for training on Sunday through Wednesday next week, administrators and certified staff.
Like the budget to me was the biggest thing. Thanks.
True.
You're off the hook, Ren.
Item 10.0, new continuing business and announcements.
The only piece I wanted to circle back with the board from our board self-evaluation from last month was to have a little bit of focused conversation on our committee assignments. So I went through our 22-23 committee assignments, and we had discussed really focusing in on those that are required per policies. So our finance and facilities committee, it's very interesting. There's actually only a couple that are explicitly stated within our board policy. The rest are really as needed, we shall form these types of committees. So the ones that I would suggest that we continue on based on policy as well as good practice is our finance and facilities. We have a safety committee, but that is not per board policy, and that's really an internally operating one. So that's one that I would suggest we do as needed. The safety committee, which we maintain internally, but it's not a board committee. Then we have our behavior and intervention committee, which really falls under the school safety and discipline. And that really is an annual opportunity for this committee to review our discipline policies, our student behaviors, those types of things. That is per board policy. Then we have our board policy committee, which I would like to suggest that we actually run those as committees of the whole, immediately preceding our regular board meetings when we have policies to be reviewed. So that would just be a change in our procedure, but all 7 board members would be participating in that. And then we have our school wellness, which really only is required to meet annually per board policy. And then we have the insurance and employee wellness, which is per negotiated agreement. All other committees that are listed outside of that are superintendent committees, which are not required to have board representation on, but always welcome to be a part of those and to be open. But if we can focus on those central ones that I've highlighted, I think we will really be able to strategically make our work very efficient as a board and administrative team. Questions, feedback on that?
So how many are we eliminating?
So really, we would be looking at the Curriculum Resource Committee, the Family and Community Engagement, the School Nutrition Quality, the Communications, the Strategic Planning, Transportation. So 6.
And to clarify, it's not that the district is no longer paying attention to these items. This work is still being done at the administration level. It's just the actual board committees are
And
going
those
away.
will be as needed.
Correct. So like, for example, the Strategic Plan Committee is really as needed in the operationalization prioritizing of our strategic plan.
Mhm.
So those are more kind of ad hoc type committees when those things are needed. And again, we will share those when those happen, but a lot of
Yeah.
these other ones fall really
Right.
in the internal workings.
Right.
Again, we bring in community members. They are open to everybody, but we are not going to create them as official board open meetings type structure.
Mhm.
Just to be able to clarify and separate out the function of the committees.
So Ben, you don't want us anymore.
No, but I think if you signed up for it, you're automatically going to invite when the
Yes,
team meets.
absolutely,
If you've already signed up,
absolutely.
you'll get
Yes.
invited.
But if we have 3 board members who want to attend, we still have to post a meeting, right?
Then you do actually create the Open Meetings Act that then you trigger that. So the idea is that if you are a participant, that we limit that to 2 people or less. And the commitment then on our side is that as we have these committee works, that we are regularly reporting out for the full board to review and discuss when actions or recommendations come out of the committees.
Mhm.
So if there are individual ones that you are on that you would like to further discuss, I think we can do that. But if we're okay with focusing at least these ones, which again is our pretty standard practice, I think that will help give some clarity and direction to our SLT so that we can kind of better plan for these this year.
I think the safety would be kind of a more of an internal one discussion. But I definitely think we need to have a couple meetings with that, especially with what's been going on and with what we're planning to do with the facility work to sort of make sure that what the facilities wants to do and what we think for safety wise is a good thing. Because I know there was some discussion about bringing in the police, all the police departments having just a general discussion about that.
Yes, and we run those internally. So we have had those in the past, and we will continue to have safety committees within the district. It's just not designating it as a board standing committee.
But we will get feedback.
Yes,
We'll get-
yes,
And you're
absolutely.
And you're welcome to attend
Yes,
with advance notice so we make sure we don't exceed the whole May.
yes.
Can you send that out then when you kind of get that? I know it's.
Yes,
it's-
I will. I started updating it, so I'll give another refresh to the document and we'll better define it now that we have the SLT can get their eyes on it, and then we'll plan out for the year. And open to feedback, and this is an annual ongoing thing, so open to evolving.
Any questions, comments? Joe, you got Dr. Sig?
My concern would be specifically curriculum resource, where we have 3 board members who regularly like to attend.
Yes. So I think hopefully what you've seen in our last year is that we report out everything that happens for the full board with everything from that curriculum committee. So I think this is where we talked about clarity of purpose. If it's really to engage our parents and family members in feedback on that, that's not for board reporting purposes.
But it'll still be open to the family members who.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Any other questions, comments? All right. 11.0 special interest topics. 11.01 FOIA requests. Mr. Vittori.
The Human Resource Department has fulfilled 1 FOIA request since our last report to the board.
Item 12.0 report to the Board of Education. I will just add the Cameo had their picnic. I know Ron was there and Dr. Bresnahan were there. I got there after they did, but they still had plenty of food left over. But it was actually a nice discussion with some of the custodial staff, especially some of the lead or the head custodians. Some were very knowledgeable of what's happening in their schools. And some of the retirees, yes, some of the retirees, and they know a lot's going on in the district. Talking to what's going on and stuff like that. They were asking me questions like, well, I can't really answer that because we haven't made a decision yet, but they're asking what's going to happen. They're up to date what's going on in the equity audit. So I was very impressed at their involvement and want to be part of the district. So I'd encourage you anytime you get a chance, with the custodial staff, they know what's going on because I guess maybe they're like someone that everyone, like the hairdresser that everybody talks to kind of thing. That's all I have.
Okay.
I don't
Um,
have a report tonight, but I did gather some things together. This is something new. I'm sure you have not gotten this from me. Sort of, I feel important that we consider the safety of America after what's been going on with all the shooting and the killing and so forth. And I found this and I made copies of it for you. And I've got something from an old convention that I went to. And the speaker was Mr. McCullough, who's excellent, very, very well-known. And his big push was that all school districts should be doing more in the way of history, teaching history. And so I got that for you. So it's kind of an Americanism packet from me.
Take one down. Pass it around.
Well, they're passing out. I do want to add that,
And I think we all should think about Americanism a lot more the way things are going lately because we're in trouble.
We got everybody?
Yep.
It's that way.
I
Yep.
already did.
Okay, I got one.
Got enough?
I got one.
We got enough.
I do want to
I
add,
have some for you if you want them.
Yeah. I do want to add that the district design backpack drive is going on. There are collection sites here, and where else do they have them? The backtrack drives. Yeah. So yeah, just don't forget about the backpacks. We do have a lot, as you saw in our demographic studies, we do have a lot of families that could use assistance.
Yeah.
And I believe in August timeframe, there are some backpack giveaways. Those are coming up as well too.
Yes,
Those are right.
we are already planning and collecting for our back to school events at
Yes.
Jay and
Are we still
several
having
sites.
the community involved engagement one here this summer?
The back to school bash?
Yeah. Are you training for the obstacle course?
Yeah, I'm going to have to really prepare for that. I was unprepared last year, so yes.
So, anything else anybody want to add?
Since the last meeting, NSSEO approved their contract for certified licensed and ESP. I was on the negotiation committee and it was long,
Yes.
a long thing to deal with.
Yes, I feel your pain.
Yeah. Do we want to report out anything from the Facilities and Finance Committee about some of the things Albert was doing in the classrooms, the numbers on windows, that sort of thing?
Well, I think that there was Albert has some great ideas for what he's doing. Like one of the things that came out of what happened in Texas was the identification of classrooms is hard. So he's working on getting some signage to be put outside each of our classrooms, identifying the classroom number. We are also looking at the facilities at our facilities as a way of, can we install windows for access out of the building in case of emergency? I think we're lucky in our district that all our schools are a single floor, one floor, so it's easier for that kind of access to be done. So that's going to be kind of something we're going to look at as the year progresses and hopefully have some solutions early winter time so we can get it implemented
Sounds
next
like
summer.
a good idea.
I apologize. I know it's the board's turn to talk. I just wanted to note though that these discussions were happening before Texas. The district has been extremely proactive. Dr. Ossel and I have worked very closely with some of the other administrators. So I just wanted to put that on everyone's radar too.
Thank you for reminding me. I should have said that as well. With that, any other reports? All right, can we get a motion to move the closed session?
I'll make the motion. Be resolved on the 11th day of July 2022, the Community Consolidated School District 59 Board of Education recess in a closed meeting for discussion of as presented in A, B, C, and D of this motion.
I'll second it.
Questions, comments?
No.
Roll call?
Yeah. Sager?
Aye.
Schumacher?
Aye.
Espino?
Aye.
Lang is absent. Mencia?
Aye.
Petrielli, aye. And Reed?
Aye.
And the motion passes.